The planet was called Haven once, a name for a safe place, a home. Now, its name was a series of letters and numbers on an alien chart. Xylo's Resource Outpost 77G. The sky was not blue anymore. It was a dirty orange color, stained by smoke from the big alien machines that never stopped working. The air tasted of metal and dust. Everyone who went outside wore a mask over their nose and mouth. Ji-hyun moved through this broken world. She was a young woman, quiet and careful. Her job was to find things in the ruins. Useful things. Metal, old electronics, anything the aliens might pay for. She worked for a man named Mr. Park, who owned the salvage yard. It was a hard life, but it was the only life she had. This city had been her home. She remembered streets filled with people and green trees. Now, there were only skeletons of buildings. Walls were black from old fires. The silence was the loudest sound. Sometimes the wind would whistle through broken windows, and it sounded like a ghost. Today, she was in a place that was once a park. A wide, open space where children used to play. Now it was a giant hole in the ground, a crater. The aliens had bombed it during the pacification. That was their word for the war. The day they took the planet. The day Ji-hyun lost everything. Her family had been here when the bombs fell. Her mother, her father, her older brother Minsu. They were all gone. She was the only one left. Sometimes, she felt like a ghost herself, walking through the memories of a life that was stolen. She held a device in her hand called a mag picker. It beeped when it found metal buried under the ground. It was her only friend on these long, lonely days. She swept it back and forth over the dirt and rubble. It was mostly quiet. Then, near a pile of twisted metal that was once a playground slide, it let out a sharp, steady beep. Something was down there. Something big. She put the mag picker away and took out a small shovel. She started to dig. The dirt was hard and packed down. Took a long time. Her arms began to ache. But the mag picker kept beeping, telling her she was close. She dug around a large piece of broken concrete. Underneath, tangled in some rusted wires, was a helmet that it was not like the smooth, modern helmets the Xylo soldiers wore. This was old. It was a human helmet. A soldier's helmet from the United Terran Defense Force. She had seen pictures of them. This one was scarred and dirty. One side was burned black, as if it had been hit by a blast of fire. But the main part of it looked solid. It was not crushed. The dark lens over the face was cracked, but still in one piece. It looked like a dead eye, staring up at the ugly sky. She reached down and wrapped her fingers around it. It was heavy, heavier than she thought it would be. Pulling it free from the dirt felt like pulling a root from the ground. She held it in her hands, turning it over. It was cold. On the inside of the neck, where the seal was, she saw some numbers and letters scratched into the material. She wiped the grime away with her thumb. She could read it. Lee MH. A name, or part of one. This helmet belonged to someone. A real person. A soldier who had fought and died here in this park, in this city. A strange feeling went through her. It was not just a piece of scrap metal. It was a piece of a person. Piece of history. Her history. She put the helmet carefully into her large canvas bag. She did not look for anything else that day. She felt a sudden need to get away from the crater, from the ghosts of the park. Her home was a small room in the back of Mr. Park's salvage yard. The walls were made of old shipping containers stacked on top of each other. It was not much, but it was safe and dry. Mr. Park was an old man, with a face full of wrinkles and a grumpy manner. He had known her family. He was one of the few people who was kind to her, even if he never smiled. "Find anything good, or just more junk?" he asked as she walked past his office. His voice was rough, like grinding stones. "Just junk?" Ji-hyun said softly, not stopping. She did not want to show him the helmet. Not why I in her room. She took the helmet out of her bag. She placed it on her small, cluttered workbench. The single, dark lens seemed to watch her. She lit a small lamp and got a clean cloth and a bowl of water. She began to clean it. She worked slowly, carefully. She wiped away the crusted dirt and the soot. The helmet was a dark green color underneath. She could see tiny scratches all over it, from sand and shrapnel. She cleaned around the lens, being very gentle with the crack. She found more markings on the top, symbols she did not understand. Squad designations, maybe. As she cleaned, she thought about the soldier.
L'IMH.
Who was he? Was he young? Was he scared when he died? Did he have a family waiting for him somewhere that he never returned to? Her own loss felt fresh again, mixing with the story of this stranger. This helmet was a connection, a bridge to the past, to the day her world ended. When it was as clean as she could make it, she placed it back on the workbench. It looked different now, no longer just a piece of forgotten trash. It had a presence, felt important. She was tired. The day had been long and the emotions were heavy. She lay down on her small bed, looking at the helmet in the dim light. Outside, she could hear the constant, low hum of the Xylos machinery. The sound of her planet being taken apart, piece by piece. It was a sound of defeat. A sound that said humans had lost. They were weak. They were nothing. But holding that helmet today, feeling its weight, she did not feel like nothing. The soldier who wore this helmet had fought. He had stood his ground. He had not run. He had died, but he had tried. She fell asleep with the image of the helmet in her mind. She did not dream of the orange sky or the silent ruins. She dreamed of a green park and the sound of children laughing. And for the first time in a long time, the dream did not end with an explosion. It was just a quiet, peaceful afternoon, under a blue sky, a memory safe and whole, a ghost of a better time, given to her by a ghost in a scrapyard helmet. The helmet sat on Jihyun's workbench for days. It was just a silent object, piece of history. She would look at it while she sorted through other, less interesting scraps. It was a mystery she could not solve. The name Lee MH was a small clue to a very big story, a story that was lost. Life on the scrapyard planet went on as always. The orange sky, the dusty air, the loud, never-ending noise of the Xylos machines grinding up the past. Jihyun continued her work. She went out to the ruins with her mag picker and her bag. She found broken pipes and torn wires. She brought them back to Mr. Park. He would give her a few credits and a quiet nod. It was a lonely life, but it was familiar. Then, something strange happened. A big Xylos lifter ship was taking off from the main mining pit. It used a lot of power. For a moment, all the lights in the scrapyard flickered. The machines hummed louder and then softer. A surge of energy moved through the old wires that powered Jihyun's shelter. A spark jumped from a loose cable on her wall. It was a small, bright flash. It touched a port on the side of the helmet she had found. There was a soft popping sound. Then, nothing. Jihyun, who was cleaning a piece of metal, looked over. She saw the spark. She frowned and went to check the cable. It seemed fine. She looked at the helmet. It looked the same. The dark lens was still dark. She decided it was just a faulty wire and thought no more about it. That night, a storm came. It was not a storm of rain. On this dry planet, storms were made of wind and dust and electricity. The sky flashed with green light. The wind howled like a hungry animal, throwing sand against the walls of her shelter. The power flickered again, on and off. Jihyun went to bed early, pulling her thin blanket up to her chin. The sound of the storm was loud, but she was used to it. It was just another noise in a noisy world. She fell into a deep sleep. A voice woke her. It was not a loud voice. It was not a human voice. It was flat. It had no feeling in it. It was like a machine reading words from a screen. The sound came from her workbench. Designation? Jihyun's eyes opened. The room was dark except for the green light from the storm flashing through the window. She lay perfectly still, her heart beating fast. She thought she had dreamed it. The voice came again. State your designation. Soldier. It was coming from the helmet. A faint, amber glow was coming from its cracked lens. It was a soft light, like a dying ember. Jihyun sat up slowly. She was afraid. This was impossible. The helmet was broken. It was old. It was just a piece of scrap. She pushed back her blanket and stood up. She took a small step toward the workbench. "Hello?" she whispered. Her voice was shaky. The amber light pulsed once, very slowly. Civilian detected. Threat assessment low. Connection unstable. File corruption 94.7%. The words meant nothing to her. "Threat assessment?" she said. "What are you?" "I am Unit 734, Infantry Corps." There was a pause. The light flickered. "I am
Corporal Lee Minho.
last log entry. The fall of Serenity Point. Lee Min-ho." So that was the full name.
L'IMH.
The soldier. But this was not a recording. It was talking to her. "Are you alive in there?" Ji-hyun asked, her voice full of wonder and fear. "Negative. Biological functions terminated. This is a residual tactical intelligence. A ghost." The voice was still perfectly flat, but the word ghost sent a chill down her spine. "You're the soldier from the helmet," she said, moving a little closer. "I found you. In the park." "Park?" The light pulsed. "Designation, LZ Gamma. A landing zone." "It was a park." "Yes," Ji-hyun said softly. "It was a park. Children played there." There was a long silence. The only sound was the storm outside. Ji-hyun thought the voice had gone away. Then the helmet spoke again, and its tone was different. It was still a machine, but the words were slower, more confused. "I remember grass. I remember a swing set. It was red. The civilians. We told them to run." Ji-hyun's fear was gone, replaced by a sudden, sharp sadness. "My family was here," she said. "In the city. During the pacification." "Pacification." The voice said the word, and it sounded like a curse. "That is their word. It was a massacre. We were not being pacified. We were being erased." The amber light from the helmet's lens grew a little brighter. It began to project a shaky, fuzzy image into the air above the workbench. It was a hologram, but it was broken into pieces. It was like looking through a broken window into the past. Ji-hyun saw a city, but it was not the ruined city she knew. The city was whole. Buildings were tall and clean. The sky was blue. Then, she saw black shapes in the sky. Xylo's dropships. They looked like giant metal insects. They landed in the park. The same park where she found the helmet. The hologram showed the view from the soldier's eyes. She saw his hands holding a rifle. She heard his breathing, fast and scared. She heard other voices, young men and women, shouting orders. "They're breaking through the east line. Where are the civilians? Are they clear? We have to hold. Just 5 more minutes." The images jumped and skipped. She saw the walking war machines of the Xylos. They were tall and dark, their legs like sharp stilts. Their weapons fired bolts of green energy. Where the energy hit, things did not just break. They dissolved. She saw a soldier near Lee Min-ho get hit by a green bolt. He did not have time to scream. He just turned to dust. Lee Min-ho was firing his rifle. It was useless. The bullets bounced off the machine's armor. They were not trying to win. They were just trying to be loud, to be a target. The memory focused on a single transport ship. It was an old, slow human ship. It was trying to lift off from behind a hill. It was the civilian ship, the one the soldiers were dying to protect. The Xylos machines saw it. They turned their weapons away from the soldiers and toward the ship. "No." Lee Min-ho's voice, young and desperate, came from the helmet. It was the first time Ji-hyun heard his real voice, not the flat machine voice. It was a recording from the memory. The hologram showed him running, not away but toward the machines. He was not shooting anymore. He was throwing something, a small silver device, a distraction grenade. It flashed a blinding white light. The machines turned back toward him. The last thing the hologram showed was a bright green light, filling the whole view. It was the same color as the storm lightning outside. Then the hologram vanished. The helmet's lens was just a soft amber light again. The room was silent. The storm was passing. Ji-hyun realized she was crying. The tears were warm on her cold cheeks. She was not crying for the soldier. She was crying for the lie. The Xylos said humans were terrorists. They said the soldiers fought for no reason. But they were wrong. These soldiers died for a reason. They died to save people. Did the ship get away? She whispered into the quiet room. The machine voice returned, flat and empty once more. Query: unknown. Final memory sequence corrupted. Connection unstable. Power critical. The amber light flickered, grew dim, and then went out completely. The helmet was dark and silent again. It was just a piece of scrap on a workbench. But everything had changed. Jihyun now knew a truth that was buried with the dead. The Xylos had not just defeated them. They had lied about it. They made the brave look like fools. They made sacrifice look like madness. She looked at the helmet. It was not just a piece of history anymore. It was a witness, and she was the only one who could hear its story. The days after the storm felt different. The orange sky seemed heavier. The noise of the machines felt louder. For Jihyun, the world had shifted. The helmet on her workbench was no longer a piece of scrap. It was a secret, a dangerous, important secret. She was afraid to touch it. She was afraid she might break it. She was also afraid to turn it on again. The memories inside were painful. They were like ghosts living in a machine. But she needed to know more. She needed to understand. She spent her time in the ruins, but her mind was not on her work. Her mag picker beeped, and she often walked right past the signal. She kept thinking about the soldier Lee Min-ho. She thought about the civilian ship. Did it escape? Were there people on it who lived because he died? People like her? That night, she sat in front of the helmet. Her small room was quiet. She took a deep breath. She had an idea. Her own terminal, the old computer she used to check part numbers, was powered by a small battery. It was safe. It did not surge or flicker like the main power lines. With careful hands, she found a compatible cable. She connected one end to her terminal and the other to the port on the helmet. She held her breath and turned the terminal on. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft amber light glowed from the helmet's cracked lens. It was steady this time, not flickering. Connection established. Power source stable. User Jihyun. The flat voice filled the quiet room. It was not a shock this time. It was a relief. Can you hear me? She asked. Affirmative. Audio receptors active. I want to know more, Jihyun said. About the fall. About what happened. Accessing primary memory log. File corruption. Significant. Playing available fragments. The helmet projected its shaky hologram into the air. This time, the images were a little clearer. The sound was a little better. She saw the city of Serenity Point again, but from different moments. She saw Lee Min-ho and other young soldiers. They were not fighting. They were sharing a meal from a single pot. They were laughing. One soldier, a young woman with short hair, was showing a picture to the others. It was a picture of a small child. "That's my son," the woman said, her voice proud and sad. "He's walking now. I've only seen it on a screen." The memory shifted. Now the soldiers were putting up a defensive wall. They were using old cargo containers and broken ground cars. They knew it was not strong enough. They knew it would not stop the Xylos war machines. But they worked anyway. They had a job to do. An older soldier, a sergeant with a tired face, was talking to Lee Min-ho. "They're counting on us, Lee. Every single person on that transport. We are the door. And we have to stay shut."
Lee Min-ho nodded.
He was young, maybe the same age as Jihyun. He looked scared, but his voice was firm. "We'll hold them, Sarge." The memory jumped again. Now the attack had begun. The hologram shook with every explosion. The sounds were terrible. The zipping sound of enemy fire. The loud booms of their own weapons. The screams. Jihyun watched, her hands clenched into fists. She saw the Xylos machines walk through the soldiers' defenses like they were nothing. The wall of cargo containers was kicked aside. The soldiers fired their rifles, but it was like throwing stones at a mountain. She saw the young woman who showed the picture get hit. She did not turn to dust. A piece of flying metal hit her leg. She fell, crying out in pain. Lee Min-ho ran to her, pulling her behind a broken vehicle. "Stay down," he yelled. "But the line, they're breaking through," the woman cried. "We have to hold," he shouted back. His voice was raw. "For the ship." The hologram showed Lee Min-ho looking up. The civilian transport was still on the ground. Its engines were glowing, but it was not moving. It was too heavy. Or there was a problem. It was stuck. A feeling of cold horror filled Ji-hyun. They were dying for nothing. The ship was not leaving. Then, she saw it. A different memory. Not from the park, but from a communication device. Lee Min-ho was listening to a radio. A voice, calm but urgent, came through. "All units, this is evac control. The primary transport is experiencing engine lag. We need 2 more minutes. I repeat, we need 2 more minutes. Hold the line. 2 minutes." It did not sound like a long time, but for the soldiers on the ground it was a lifetime. It was an eternity. Lee Min-ho looked at his fellow soldiers. They were few now. Many were already gone. He made a decision. He stood up. "He's creating a distraction," someone yelled. Lee Min-ho did not run toward the machines this time. He ran to a different spot. He found a large, powerful-looking weapon on the ground. It was a rocket launcher dropped by a fallen soldier. He picked it up. It was heavy. He did not aim at the walking machines. He aimed at a large fuel tank near the edge of the landing zone. "Close your eyes," he screamed. He fired the rocket. The hologram turned blindingly white. The sound was deafening. The fuel tank exploded in a huge fireball. It did not destroy any Xylos machines, but it got their attention. The fire and smoke were a giant signal. It made the machines turn away from the hidden transport ship and look at him. In that moment, the transport ship's engines roared to full power. It lifted off the ground. It rose slowly, then faster, climbing into the blue sky. Lee Min-ho watched it go. The hologram showed a tiny, shaky view of the ship getting smaller and smaller. A small, tired smile touched his lips. Then, the green light came. The same green light that ended the first memory. Filled the view. This time, the memory did not end right away. It held for a second. Ji-hyun heard Lee Min-ho's last, quiet breath. It was not a scream. It was a sigh. It was the sound of a job finished. The hologram vanished. The room was dark and quiet again. The amber light of the helmet was steady. Ji-hyun was crying. She did not try to stop the tears. She cried for the brave, foolish soldier. She cried for the woman with the picture of her son. She cried for all of them. They were not just names in a history book. They were real people. They chose to die so others could live. The flat machine voice broke the silence. Query: did they make it? Ji-hyun looked at the helmet. The ghost inside did not know. It was his last, unfinished thought. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "But they tried. Because of you, they had a chance." The helmet was silent for a long time. "Acknowledged," it said finally. The word was still flat, but to Ji-hyun, it sounded like peace. The truth was a heavy weight inside Ji-hyun. Knowing what really happened at Serenity Point changed everything. It made the orange sky feel like a lie. It made the Xylos machines sound like thieves, stealing not just metal, but the memory of what people here had done. She started to spend more time with the helmet. She called it Min-ho. Not out of friendship, but out of respect. It was not a person. It was a recording, a ghost. But it was the only witness she had. She learned how to give it more power from her battery. She learned which commands made the memory files play. She did not watch the battle memories again. They were too painful. Instead, she asked it questions. Can you connect to other things? To the Scrapyard network? The helmet's amber light pulsed. Affirmative. This unit possesses a quantum core communication suite. It is damaged but functional. Can interface with local data networks. Ji-hyun thought about this. The Scrapyard was run by a simple computer network. It told the machines what to crush, what to sort. It was a brain for the giant metal insects that ate her world. A strange idea began to form in her mind. The Xylos thought humans were gone. They thought the fight was over. But what if they knew they were being watched? What if the past refused to be quiet? Can you talk to the network? She asked. Can you send a message? Defined parameters required. What is the message? Jihyun looked around her small room, at the walls of her container home. She looked at the helmet, a piece of the past that would not die. Just a hello? She said softly. That night, a strange thing happened at the scrapyard. The night watchman, a tired man named Choi, was making his rounds. He passed by the main ore processor, a giant machine that chewed up rocks and metal. Suddenly, the machine let out a low hum. Then, a different sound came from its internal speakers. It was a sound of music, a simple old tune, a human lullaby, played for maybe 10 seconds and then stopped. Mr. Choi shook his head and blamed it on bad wiring. The next day, a Xylos shuttle landed at the main administration building. The shuttle was smooth and black, like a polished stone. Out stepped Magistrate Tull. He was a tall, thin alien. His skin was a pale gray color. His eyes were large and dark, with no white in them. He moved in a slow, precise way that showed he was in charge. He was there for a routine inspection. He looked at the reports of metal output. He listened to the human foreman talk about work schedules. He was bored. Humans were a defeated species. Managing them was a dull job. As he walked back to his shuttle, something caught his eye. On the side of his own ship, a perfect image was projected. It was a symbol, a circle of stars on a dark blue background. The old flag of the United Terran Defense Force. It was clean and bright, a stark contrast to the dirty ship. Tull stopped. His large, dark eyes narrowed. "What is this?" he hissed. His voice was dry, like scraping paper. His assistant, a flustered Xylos technician, rushed forward. "I do not know, Magistrate. A prank? A projection from the workers' quarters. Find it. Erase it," Tull said coldly. He entered his shuttle, his good mood gone. He saw it as vandalism, a petty act of defiance from a broken people. The incidents did not stop. A day later, every screen in the administration building flickered at the same time. For 1 second, they all showed the same 2 words, written in the human language. "We remember." Then it was gone. Tull was angry now. This was not a simple prank. It was coordinated. He stood in the control room, his long fingers gripping the console. "This is not bad wiring," he said to the foreman, his voice dangerously quiet. "This is data vermin, a persistent glitch in your outdated systems. I want a full system purge. Find the source and destroy it." The order went out. Xylos technicians began to scan the entire scrapyard network. They were looking for the source of the messages. Back in her shelter, Jihyun watched through a small window. She saw the technicians with their scanning devices. Her heart beat fast. She was afraid. "They are looking for you," she said to the helmet. The amber light glowed steadily. "Their search protocols are elementary. I have routed my signal through multiple non-critical systems. They will trace it to a broken water recycler in Sector 7. Jihyun almost smiled. The ghost in the machine was clever. It was fighting back the only way it could. With information. With memories. That evening, Mr. Park came to her door. His old face was grim. "Jihyun," he said, not coming inside. "The aliens are upset. They are looking for a disturbance in the network." He looked at her closely. His eyes, wise and tired, saw too much. "You have been quiet lately, and you found that old helmet." She did not say anything. She just looked at the floor. Mr. Park sighed. "Be careful, girl. These are not people you can play games with. They crushed our fleet. They broke our worlds. A few words on a screen will not change that. It will just get you killed." After he left, Jihyun felt doubt. Was she being foolish? Was Mr. Park right? She looked at the helmet. Are we doing anything? Or are we just making noise? The helmet was silent for a moment. Then it spoke. Query, what is an echo? The question surprised her. An echo? A sound. It comes back after the original sound is gone. Affirmative, the helmet said. This is the function. We are not the original sound. We are the echo. The Xylos believe the sound of humanity is gone. We are reminding them that sound waves travel far. And echoes linger in places they cannot see. Jihyun understood. They were not an army. They were a memory, a reminder. The Xylos wanted to forget what they had done. They wanted to pretend it was a simple, clean victory. The echo was here to tell them it was not. The next day, the system purge happened. The technicians thought they found the source and wiped it clean. The glitches stopped. Magistrate Tull was satisfied. The data vermin was gone. Order was restored. But in a small shelter, an old helmet sat on a workbench, its internal light glowing softly. It was not gone. It was just quiet. It was listening. It was waiting. The galaxy thought humanity was a finished story. But in the dark, an echo was preparing to answer. The quiet did not last. The Xylos technicians were good at their job. They had traced the main signal to a broken recycler, as the helmet had planned. But they found a smaller, secondary signal they had missed before. A tiny digital footprint leading away from the recycler. It was faint, but it was there. It led them directly to Mr. Park's salvage yard. Magistrate Tull did not come with a full squad. He came with only 2 enforcers, their dark armor making them look like giant, walking bugs. He believed this was a small problem. A final nuisance to be crushed. He found Jihyun outside her shelter, sorting a pile of copper wire. The helmet was inside, hidden under a cloth. Tull stood before her, his gray face showing no emotion. His large, dark eyes looked around the messy yard with disgust. The disturbances in the network, he said, his voice flat. They ended when we purged the recycler in Sector 7. But they began here. There is a data trail. What have you done, scavenger? Jihyun's heart felt like a rock in her chest. She kept her eyes on the ground. I have done nothing. I just sort the scrap. Do not lie to me, Tull said, taking a step closer. This pathetic scrapyard is a monument to your species' failure. You cling to the past because you have no future. And you cling to your little tricks. He gestured to one of the enforcers. Search her shelter. The enforcer moved toward the door. Without thinking, Jihyun stepped in his way. It was a small movement, but it was enough. Tull's eyes narrowed. He knew that he pushed past her and entered the small room. His eyes scanned the clutter and landed on the workbench, on the shape under the cloth. He walked over and pulled the cloth away. The helmet sat there, silent and dark. Tull picked it up. He turned it over in his long, gray hands. A relic, he sneered. A dead soldier's toy. This is what has been causing me trouble. He looked at Jihyun, who stood in the doorway, her face pale. This is the ghost you have been talking to? He dropped the helmet onto the floor. It hit the metal with a loud clang. He raised his foot. A plasma cutter built into the sole of his boot, glowing with a hot, blue light. No! Jihyun screamed that as Tull's foot came down. The helmet's lens blazed with a sudden, fierce amber light. It was not a soft glow anymore. It was a bright, angry beam. Threat level maximum. Defensive protocols engaged. The voice was no longer flat. It was sharp and clear. It was a soldier's voice. The blue light of Tull's plasma cutter died. The lights in the shelter flickered and went out. Then, the entire scrapyard outside went dark. The constant, grinding noise of the machines stopped. An eerie silence fell. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the scrapyard woke up. It did not wake up in a normal way. It woke up like a monster. A giant magnetic crane, used for moving crushed cars, swung its arm wildly. It was not being operated by a person. It moved on its own. The huge magnet slammed into the 2 enforcers standing outside, pinning them against a stack of metal containers with a deafening crash. Alarms began to blare all across the yard. Red lights spun, painting the scene in flashes of emergency light. Tull stared in shock. He turned from the helmet on the floor to Jihyun. What is this? What have you done? Jihyun did not answer. She was as surprised as he was. The helmet was connected. It was using the yard's own systems. It was turning the tools of the Xylos against them. A welding robot, a machine with 6 arms, scuttled out from a corner. Its welding torch ignited, not with a soft flame, but with a long, roaring jet of fire. It moved toward Tull, cutting off his path to the door. Outside, more machines were going crazy. Conveyor belts ran backwards, spilling piles of sorted metal. A giant shredder machine turned on and began eating the wall of the administration building. It was chaos. It was a rebellion of machines. Tull was trapped. He looked at the helmet on the floor. The amber light was a steady, accusing eye. He looked at Ji-hyun. His fear turned to anger. "You think this changes anything?" He spat. "This is just noise. A tantrum. We broke your armies. We will break this little ghost, and we will break you." He lunged at her, his long fingers reaching for her throat, but he never made it. The magnetic crane outside swung its arm again. This time, the magnet hit the side of Ji-hyun's shelter. The wall of the container buckled inward with a terrible screech of tearing metal. The roof above Tull groaned and sagged. A support beam snapped and fell, hitting him on the shoulder. He cried out and fell to his knees, trapped under the weight. Dust filled the air. The red alarm lights flashed through the gloom. Ji-hyun stood unhurt, shielded by the angle of the collapse. She coughed, waving dust from her face. She saw Tull on the floor, struggling under the beam. She saw the helmet, still glowing. A few feet away, she walked over and picked it up. It was warm in her hands. She held it and looked down at the magistrate. The sounds of the chaotic scrapyard were the sounds of his perfect system falling apart. The grinding, the crashing, the alarms. It was the sound of his control ending. Tull looked up at her, his dark eyes wide with pain and hate. "You are nothing," he gasped. "You are dust." Ji-hyun held the helmet tightly. Its light illuminated her face, showing a strength she did not know she had. "No," she said, her voice quiet but firm in the chaos. "We are an echo, and you are finally listening." The scrapyard was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. The grinding machines were still. The alarms had stopped. The only sounds were the moans of the trapped enforcers and the ragged breathing of Magistrate Tull. He was pinned under the fallen beam, his gray face twisted in pain and fury. He watched Ji-hyun, who stood holding the helmet. Its amber light was a calm, steady eye in the wreckage. The ghost in the machine had done its work. It had used the scrap and the junk as its weapons. It had turned the Xylos' own tools against them. But the fight was not over. The real battle was just beginning. The helmet's voice spoke, its tone focused and clear. Magistrate Tull's personal communicator is active. It is linked to the Xylos Galactic Network. This is a high-priority channel. Ji-hyun looked at Tull. She saw a small device on his wrist, blinking with a faint light. He had been trying to call for help, for more soldiers, for warships. "I can access it," the helmet said. "I can broadcast on his channel." "What would we say?" Ji-hyun asked softly. "We cannot fight all his soldiers. We do not send a threat. We do not send a declaration of war. We send the truth." Understanding dawned on Ji-hyun's face. The Xylos had lied. They had told the galaxy that humans were violent and foolish, that they fought for no reason, that their defeat was deserved. But she held the real story in her hands. "Do it," she said. Tull's eyes widened. "No, you cannot. That data is classified. It is." His words were cut off as the amber light from the helmet brightened, enveloping the small device on his wrist. A low hum filled the air. Accessing primary memory log, the fall of Serenity Point. Compiling all visual and audio records. Preparing for transmission. In that moment, the ghost of Corporal Lee Min-ho reached out. It did not reach with guns or bombs. It reached with memory. It reached with truth. The helmet sent a signal not to a single person, but to the entire Xylos communication network. And from there, it spread. It was not a loud, angry broadcast. It was a quiet data packet, a file. It was sent to every ship, every outpost, every planet that was linked to the Xylos. It was the unedited, raw story of the last day of Serenity Point. On a Xylos battleship near a blue star, a communications officer saw a priority message flagged from Outpost 77G. He opened it, expecting a report from Magistrate Tull. Instead, he saw a shaky view from a human soldier's helmet. He saw the park. He heard the desperate shouts. He saw the civilian transport. He saw the soldiers die not as terrorists but as protectors. He saw the lie his government had told on a busy space station. A merchant from another species was checking trade reports on a public terminal. The screen suddenly changed. It showed a young human woman, her face smudged with dirt, showing a picture of her child. Then, it showed her screaming as a piece of metal tore into her leg. The merchant stared, his business forgotten that I end the grand halls of the Xylos High Command. An urgent alert flashed on a dozen screens. High-ranking officials watched, their faces growing hard and cold, as the final moments of Lee Min-ho played out before them. They saw the explosion he caused. They saw the transport ship escape because of his sacrifice. They heard his last, quiet breath. They saw the proof that their pacification was a massacre of heroes. The galaxy did not hear a scream of rage. It heard a sigh of sacrifice. It did not see a weapon of war. It saw a story of love for one's people. It was a truth that could not be argued with. It was simple and it was human. Back in the scrapyard, the light from the helmet faded. The transmission was complete. The ghost had told its story. It had done its duty, once and for all. The helmet in Ji-hyun's hands grew heavier. The warm light in its lens flickered, grew dim, and then went out. It was dark. It was just a piece of old, scarred metal again. The ghost was gone. Its echo had been sent. For a long time, there was only silence. Then they heard a new sound, the deep, thrumming engine of a ship that was not Xylos in design. It was a blocky, sturdy human freighter. It descended through the orange sky, its landing lights cutting bright beams through the dust. The ship landed not far from the broken shelter. The ramp lowered. A man and a woman stood there, dressed in practical, patched-up clothes. They were not soldiers. They were scavengers, traders, people who lived in the dark spaces of the galaxy. They had heard the broadcast. The woman looked at Ji-hyun, then at the pinned magistrate, then at the helmet in Ji-hyun's arms. She nodded, a look of deep respect on her face. "The echo reached us," the woman said. "We heard it all the way out in the belt. We're not the only ones. That signal, it's everywhere." Ji-hyun looked down at the dark helmet. Lee Min-ho's story was free. It was flying across the stars, changing minds, shaking empires. The Xylos could no longer hide what they had done. The galaxy was learning who humans really were. She knelt and placed the helmet gently on the ground. It was just scrap again, but it was the most important piece of scrap in the universe. Magistrate Tull watched it all, his body broken, his power gone. He had believed that to defeat a people you only had to break their ships and their buildings. He now understood his mistake. You had to erase their stories. And humanity's stories, he realized with a cold dread, had just begun to be told. Ji-hyun stood up. She did not look at Tull. She looked at the newcomers. She looked at the sky. The orange was starting to fade at the edges, letting a little blue show through. It was not much, but it was a change. She was just a scavenger, a girl from a broken world. But she had found a ghost in a scrapyard helmet, and she had helped it remind the galaxy that humanity's spirit was not so easily broken. The fight was not won, but for the first time since the fall it had begun. And it began not with a bang, but with an echo.